Have you ever wondered what it might be like to adjust everything to your liking so Apex comes out to be the perfect game? Well, today we are going to do just that. Every single change that we go over today at its core is about making the game a little bit more balanced or making that specific character a little bit more viable or less viable in the meta. I also have something very special to share with you that you aren't going to want to miss and is the sponsor of today's video. Outplayed is the #1 way for you to automatically record your entire gameplay or just your highlights, so all you got to do is play, and Outplayed does its thing in the background. If you do feel the need to tweak and edit your clips, no problem. Outplayed has you covered on that as well. The best part is that Outplayed can automatically do this for 300 games, and you can select the individual moments you want to highlight from your kills, assists, knocks, and even your deaths if that is something you want to show off. And if that was not enough, you can easily share the clips to Twitter, Discord, and more straight from Outplayed's incredible software. Thanks to them for sponsoring this video. Click that link in the description or pinned comment for more. You will not be disappointed. We're gonna kick things off with Bloodhound. Bloodhound's in a pretty decent spot right now. They're both good for new players and experienced players at pretty much every single skill level, which is definitely a plus. They're easy to pick up and maybe a little bit too easy at times. As a whole, I'm not a fan of the scanning meta, and I think Season 15 is gonna cook up something very nice for the scanning meta, but I still think the scan meta is definitely gonna be viable in Season 15. Overall, I want to see Bloodhound's recon capabilities go down a little bit by reducing the tactical active scan time from 3 seconds down to 1 or 1.5 seconds. This basically is going to reduce the offensive power just from a tactical ability, and it's going to make scanning a little bit more of a utility and an actual recon tool rather than an offensive power move. This is also going to reduce the spammy nature of the scanning meta. Plus, it's going to make the game feel a little bit less crutchy. It's going to force players to have game sense, and through all this, it's going to make that ultimate a little bit more of a premier ability that needs to be saved. I'm going to go one step further and say that the 3-second scan timer can still be active while you are in Bloodhound's ultimate, which again is going to make Bloodhound's ultimate a little bit more of that ultimate ability that you really need to save for that right moment. In turn, it's going to also improve the experience of a few other legends like Bangalore. Moving on, we are going to have Gibraltar, who is also a rock-solid legend right now. Still extremely powerful, still very useful. I do think Gibraltar got knocked down a peg ever since Newcastle did come into the game, but still, Gibraltar's a harder legend to use. Everyone knows this. The one nerf I do want to see for Gibraltar is to nerf the capabilities of the tactical dome shield by reducing the length that the dome is active or removing the revive capabilities. Having the dome shield on the ground alone is enough of a revive support. You don't need to have a faster revive in there as well, and by removing this, it's going to make Newcastle's support capabilities a little bit better with their revives, as is it's going to do the same for Lifeline. I just think faster reviving seems a little bit unnecessary. It does give it a little unique characteristic, so I do get it, but I do want to have the revive capabilities come down a little bit. A while back, when Gibraltar was rumored to be getting some sort of nerf, it was brought up in discussion quite a bit that maybe you would just add a health bar to the dome shield. I actually like that it is impenetrable, so I like the way it is. I think it makes it pretty unique, and I much rather do what they did do, which is adding some ways to counter that ability, not just straight up nerfing every good ability that is in the game, because this kind of removes the fun factor from a lot of things. If we look at Lifeline, she's very good at what she does, which is of course reviving and supporting the team. Overall though, I think Lifeline is a little weak. Other legends can do what she does, but better, much like Newcastle, and of course we did mention Gibraltar. I do enjoy that Lifeline is a very effective legend at what she does, and she's very approachable, which I think is very good. We do want some legends that are a little bit easier. I have two things that I do want for Lifeline. For one, you gotta bring back the revive shield, but instead of adding a health counter like a lot were saying, I want to see the shield reduced in height so the player on the ground is still protected, but the players standing around that revive shield are actually still exposed from the waist up. By doing this, it's a little bit more risky for the Lifeline to get that revive in there, but it's a little bit safer for the player that is on the ground. It's going to increase the offensive power in some ways, which I think is always great. It's also going to increase the support power, which again, I think is a plus. It adds depth to her kit as well. It's more than just, click the player and they start reviving. You have a little bit more to it, which I think is also good because it's going to add a skill gap. And the second thing that I do want to see for Lifeline, even more so than the first thing, is to just eliminate the care package and give Lifeline some sort of healing team ultimate ability, maybe an area effect ability that you can't put on the ground, and when players walk into it for like 30 seconds, as long as they aren't taking damage, they will get some health back. Lifeline to me seemed more like a healer, so the extra loot just seems unnecessary. We got Loba if you want some extra loot, so I think Lifeline could definitely use a healing ability. Pathfinder for me is a great legend, but maybe a little weak when it does come to the overall team usefulness. They are a hard to pick up legend and a hard to master legend, which I think is good. Unlike Bloodhound, you need some legends that are on the opposite spectrum, and there are legends that are hard to use. The main buff I want to give Pathfinder is making him a little bit more capable in the passive ability aspect. Giving him faster zipline travel is what I want, and maybe even faster zipline travel for squad mates that are on the same zipline as him at the same time. This is going to increase his transportation and rotational capabilities as well as his teammates. It's also going to give him a little bit more offensive power. And a second small buff that I would give Pathfinder is going to be reducing his size a little bit. It's not too bad, but he is very large compared to a lot of the other legends, and that walking refrigerator is a little thick. Another OG powerhouse legend is of course Wraith, and she's a little archaic at this point, so she could use a lot to move her into more relevancy with Apex fast-paced meta movement and super rotations of Valkyrie. She's still very good though. Updates to her portal is what I want the most. It's probably what she needs to bring her back into relevance for team play. Increasing the distance and increasing her movement speed is mainly what I want. I know she used to have this and they did remove it. I think we have kind of evolved the game, and I think it's okay to bring it back to what it was or even buff it a little bit more. I want the portal to go 125 meters, and let's give her 10% movement speed while she is placing down that portal. She could also get extra speed to run away from enemies when you are using the portal, which I think is good. It gives her a little bit more of the escape artistry, and it's going to better help her compete with the rotational power of Valkyrie. Valkyrie's ultimates can travel 100s and 100s of meters further than Wraith, so having a little bit more distance on the portal I think is warranted. Bangalore, on the other hand, has been hurting for a long time, and it's just due to the meta that she has been placed in. The scanning meta is really tough to battle, as more times than not, every engagement still has a scanner legend. She's still a really great legend though outside of this, and if you're not fighting a scanner legend, she's a really solid option. For starters, when you're in the smoke, you can't be scanned. I think this would be a good thing. And another thing that I want to see is that when enemies enter the smoke, you're going to briefly lose your HUD capabilities, just temporarily. Basically, it's like a little mini EMP, and it's going to better deter enemies from entering your smoke and just keeping them away from you. This, of course, is going to have to aggressively be tweaked, so you can't just EMP hit enemies nonstop, and it would be really annoying. I don't want to have Bangalore see enemies that are in the smoke because it just promotes even more scanning, and I'm trying to get away from that. Basically, by doing this, we're just letting her combat the scanning meta, which I think would be awesome, and it's going to make her be a little bit more viable. Looking at Caustic, Caustic has been an incredible legend for quite some time now. He does require a very specific playstyle, but he is a very hybrid and multi-purpose legend who honestly can be useful in a lot of different scenarios. I think he's more annoying to play against than anything. I would give him a little nerf, and this is by removing any sort of slow effect from the gas, so you can move in and around it a little bit more freely. I want to say even let players sprint through the gas, but maybe upon entering, when you first get hit by the gas, you are brought out of sprint, but then you can sprint again after that initial stun or slowdown. This is going to lower Caustic's annoyance factor, but it's still going to make the gas a playmaker and slow enemies down and deter them from entering your area. Of course, the duration of slowdown upon initially getting hit by the gas is going to need to be tweaked pretty specifically, so you can't just sprint right through that gas instantly. But overall, I think this small little change would make Caustic's gas a little less annoying. If there's one legend who needs a lot more love than a lot of the other legends, it is going to be Mirage. He's been underperforming for a very long time. However, he is a very unique legend, and he is pretty fun for most, so I don't want him to lose his character and his uniqueness. There's a lot you can do for him, but for me, I want a tactical rework, and this is by adding a movement element in with his clones. I've heard this a few times, and I think it would make sense for Mirage. It would switch up how he is played. It's not going to be easy to code, and I get that, but it's not really for this video. Basically, I want to make it so you can teleport a small or short distance with his clones, like 12 to 15 meters. This is going to add additional or potential repositioning aspects to his kit, and the timer of the tactical would have to be increased greatly, something like 30 seconds, but being able to swap spots with that tactical decoy would be pretty cool, or at least teleporting into the tactical decoy. Also, you're going to need some sort of audio or visual indication that a player has switched spot with the clone, and maybe even a charge up time as well. This is going to give him movement, which is good. It's going to force players to also shoot the tactical decoy, which is going to be good. They're going to have to get rid of it rather than ignoring it, which pretty much everyone does right now. It's going to be hard to balance, but I think it would increase his fun factor a lot and even his viability. Season 1's Speed Demon of Octane is in a pretty fair spot, not too weak, not as powerful as he once was, but still a fun legend who is easily approachable. Not a ton I'm gonna do to Octane, but the realistic thing for me is to increase the rate at which he gains health back to 1.5, halfway between the 1.0 it is now and 2.0 that it used to be. This gives him a little bit more playmaking potential, as you could use the stim more and you're gonna get your health back a little bit faster. I don't think this would necessarily work too great, or it would have to be tweaked again like everything, but maybe the ability to hand out stims to the team. This gives Octane a way bigger team role, and maybe you could even have Octane take the stim damage for those teammates, but they get the speed effect. It could be really interesting and a fun way to coordinate attacks that I think would be pretty cool. Much like Octane, Wattson is in a pretty good spot. She's good at what she does, which is of course defending areas. You can be a little aggressive with her from time to time, but it's a little bit harder to do that. She's one of Apex's hardest legends to really get down, but she has a very tactical and well rewarding play style that is evident by her following and the players that do play her. My change for Watty would be to increase her power, definitely not a nerf. It's tough as I think both her ultimate and tactical fences are great, so my adjustments are to her shield regen, much like Octane, increasing her passive shield regeneration by another 0.25 up to 0.75 total, and let her stack 3 ultimate accelerants. Nothing too crazy for Wattson. She's pretty good as she is. One legend who has been pretty much always on the back burner though is going to be Crypto. He's more viable now than he ever has been, but there's still a little bit more that Crypto could use. There's a simple adjustment for him that is actually already in the game, and it's to let Crypto's drone maneuver around much like Vantage's bat. The big thing with this though is to have a cooldown in terms of how often you can move the drone. Unlike Vantage's bat, you can pretty much move that thing as much as you want. I don't think this would work for Crypto's drone. Spam moving it seems like it'd just be a little too powerful. However, if you can remaneuver that drone at least once, it could go a long way into making him feel a little bit better when you are entering a fight. Maybe the weakest legend out of them all is going to be Revenant, but first, if you don't want to play with those random players who are stimming across the map, dying right away, hop into my Discord. You can find a squad, party up with, chat with myself, and we'd love to have you around. Revenant struggles a lot when it comes to real usefulness for the squad, which is where I do want to see him better excel, and this revolves mainly around that Death Totem. I want to see the Death Totem lose the red wave that lets players know he is putting one out. This too automatically just lets everyone know where he exactly is coming from. I would keep the audio cue and maybe even make it a little bit louder, so players do need to be paying attention. Additionally to this, it is called the Death Totem, so let's let players use that totem connection to give them some health back. Maybe if a player has 20 health, they can go up to the totem, click on it, and it's going to give them 50 health back, much like it would take 50 health away when they do use it. This is going to give Revenant some support capability, some healing options. It's just going to make him a little bit more viable in terms of team utility. And at least in my mind, how you would do this is to have 2 buttons, one for clicking on it to have some offensive power, and then one for the support or health regen. Unlike Revenant, completely on the opposite end, one legend that is in a really great spot is going to be Loba. She's my favorite team support and beginner-friendly legend to recommend. Because of all this, there's really not a lot that she needs, but come on, you know it. Let's give our favorite Loot Queen the ability to pull those teammates' cards with her ultimate. I mean, why not? It doesn't seem game-breaking. It gives her a little bit more actual kind of viability when your team does get down. And if you want to balance it, let her only have the ability to pick up 1 card, or let it also break that ultimate, much like it would break the ultimate when you are looting from a closed vault. I think it would be pretty cool. It wouldn't be too game breaking, and why not? Rampart, however, has come a long way. She's had a ton of changes over the seasons, and I think she has landed in a solid spot. There's not too much that she needs to make her even more viable. Right now, she's a mix between offensive and defensive when it comes to her power. My only change with her is to give her passive ability just a little bit more viability. LMGs are just as a whole down a little bit. You still got the Spitfire, but the Devotion, the L-Star, and of course the Rampage and the Care Package just are not really quite the same. I want to see reduced recoil while she is using LMGs on her, and maybe even let her have the ability to still put barrel stabilizers on those LMGs. I think it would be a pretty cool and unique perk for her, and it would switch up the loot meta just a little bit more. Another legend who has seen a ton of adjustments from her powerhouse initial release during Season 7 to that big nerf she got during Season 9, and then she's had gradual buffs and tweaks since then. She's still great though. She's insane, a top tier movement legend, and it shows by her pick rate in top tier ranked modes. She has a huge skill gap as well, which I think is good. I don't think she needs that much when it comes for changes, but I think a nerf to the height of her tactical would be a fine thing to have and not game breaking for her. And I think a trade-off for this would be to buff her black hole just a little bit. I know they did kind of just nerf it, but I do think that the cooldown is pretty long for its actual viability in fights. In the opposite sense, Fuse has come a long way from his pretty poor reception to now. Fuse is good, but a small tweak can still be had. Keeping in line with the explosiveness is key for me, and definitely not losing his fun factor. One small buff I will say before I get to my real buff is that maybe Fuse takes less damage from explosives. Maybe something like a 20% reduction could be pretty cool. His tactical though is great as it is, and his ultimate is also pretty solid, but I want to see the flames from Fuse's ultimate get increased in height. It's just way too easy to jump over the firewall if there's any variation in the terrain that you are standing on. This means players are going to have to burn their movement ability to escape the ultimate, or just take better care when it is placed on the ground to make sure you're not getting stuck in it. And in turn, it's just going to give him a little bit more depth and a little bit more power for the user. Valkyrie for me is still one of the most powerful legends in the game, even after all of those Season 14 nerfs, and because of this, she's the only legend that I am not proposing any changes in either direction for right now. If they want less Valkyries, they need to make the other rotational or movement legends a little bit better and not hurt her to the point where she isn't fun or useful anymore. I know a lot of players felt like this about Octane. He just kept getting nerf after nerf after nerf, and I don't want to see this for Valkyrie. One legend who has had a huge resurgence over the last 2 seasons is going to be Seer. Personally, I find his kit very difficult to manage and a little bit annoying to play against. Specifically his tactical though, there's nothing worse than getting hit by it. He's still a fun legend for the user, which is important. My nerf actually is not going to affect his tactical. I want to see a reduction in his passive effectiveness. It's one of those abilities that players really have no idea that you are being tracked, and there really is no counter to it. I want to see players that are on Seer's Heartbeat get notified, much like any other scan that does have something pop up on the top of the screen, much like a Bloodhound scan that says you've been scanned. I want to see this for Seer's Heartbeat sensor. This is just going to balance the power of it. It's going to let you know that you are tracked, which is a good counter to it, and it's still going to let Seer have a passive as it is still unchanged, just the player can have some sort of counter. Ashe is a pretty solid legend since her release who has had minimal adjustments. She's fun, she's situational, but she does lack a little competitiveness with the other legends similar to her. For me, the tactical needs to have an increase in speed to get to the target. This would better let you snare enemies and make plays off of the tactical ability. Additionally, I want to see the snare last 1 to 2 seconds longer, but also maybe have the radius of the snare slightly larger so enemies can also get snared a little bit more easily, but in turn, they can also move further away from the center of it. All this would just make her tactical a little bit more viable while not really changing up how she is played fundamentally. Mad Maggie is kind of like Ashe as well. She's in a fine spot, but she's really not competitive in terms of the meta right now. My biggest problem for her revolves around her passive, which is okay, but not really viable in terms of playmaking. Specifically, I'm talking about the shotgun movement speed. The movement speed right now is equal to running with no guns out, which is understandable, but my buff for her is to give her a boost of 5% in movement speed when you do have a shotgun out. So this is 5% more movement speed over the default running speed. This could be kind of busted, so maybe it needs to have some sort of cooldown, but it's going to let her move a little bit quicker while you are sprinting. Mad Maggie's not bad, but she's having a hard time keeping up with some of the other Assault legends. We've got a couple more legends to cover, but if you are still here and you've made it this far, drop a smiley down below to let me know you are still watching. It'll be our little secret. And hit that like button. It's free. I greatly appreciate the support as well. Thank you so much. One of the best legends in the game right now is going to be Newcastle though. He's fun to use, he's viable in all ranks, and has a good amount of skill required to excel with him, but he's also fairly approachable, which is pretty cool. Minimal changes to his kit I think are needed, as he is overall pretty good, but I think a slight tweak would be to decrease the amount of health in his ultimate walls. These things are crazy spongy, and there's a bunch of little pieces, meaning you gotta spray a lot of rounds to really break Newcastle's ultimate. A well-coordinated team with a lot of ammo can't do this, but by shooting all these rounds, you are kind of putting yourself in a bad spot, so a lot of people just don't waste rounds on that ultimate ability. And basically, if you do reduce the health from like, I think it's 750, you reduce it down to like 550, 600, this is just going to be in that they can't wrap behind that ultimate all game long. Season 14's Vantage is up next, and she's also in a pretty solid spot. She's viable, she's fun. My nerf to her is going to be in the ultimate aspect. Getting double tapped by the sniper is a pretty tough thing to combat, so I want her to have a little bit more time between shots and maybe a little bit more recoil as well when you are using the sniper. This means you just aren't going to be able to spam it as much, and it's going to reward a patient and accurate shooter. If you want even more to master Apex Legends and improve your skills to be better at the game, check out this video right here. I'll see you in the next one.